What is going on, IOST community? This is another episode. I got the episodes wrong last time. That last week's episode was episode 6, but I called it episode 5. So we're doing episode 7 today. Hello, community. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I got a new beer on tap. It's not it's not anything special. Just Sierra Nevada Summerfest, but it's delicious.
I'm kind of a coffee guy in the middle of the day, but
what are you saying?
What? I had. You're demon in the back. So we had Josh Garcia from Quetzal Consulting on for today's podcast. Sorry, I'll move away from the mic. Thank you for telling me, Mike.
There we go.
So we had Josh Garcia from Quetzal Consulting on today. That's going to be at the latter half of the episode after the break. It was a great interview. He talked a lot about regulation within the United States. He talked a little bit about staking and lending, as well as what are a couple other things he touched on.
Compliance. They're as you'll see on the interview with them, their main role is really acting as like a compliance company. So it's not, it's certainly not like the most thrilling thing in crypto, but it's certainly a big narrative to watch and kind of see how the U.S. interacts with the rest of the world. That was one that we talked about a lot, right? And, his perspective was that the U.S. wasn't really falling behind, whereas a lot of times people's thoughts are that the U.S. is falling behind by kind of over-regulating in some cases. So,
in his idea was, or his thought on the actual process there was that it was more to do with the countries catching up as opposed to the United States falling behind. It was allowing other countries that have a more fluid regulation process to kind of make that jump from almost no maybe 5G phone, something like that, to a decentralized application very quickly.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was an interesting perspective that kind of like, U.S. is paving the way, because his thought is, okay, if you're going to have decentralized or centralized finance within crypto in any way, at some point it's going to all be regulated, right? And that he coming from that perspective, his thought was that the U.S. was actually leading the charge because they've been they've not been perfectly clear, but if you look at the SEC historically, they've actually done like a pretty good job with crypto. So it's an interesting perspective, one to definitely take. I mean, it's crypto can kind of be like an echo chamber sometimes. So hearing those inside/outside perspectives, especially from someone like Josh, who has a ton of experience, as a lawyer and with compliance through Quetzal. So.
And he also talked about the differences in culture between the West and out East, specifically Japan, but in Asia as a whole.
Yeah, one of their clients is Bitflyer, right?
Got it.
Who I believe is out of Japan. But it's an interesting one, right? Like, obviously we're in the U.S. here. That's there's kind of certain parameters that we work under where IOST is mainly an Asian or Chinese focused project. So it's been something really interesting for us to see, right? To interact with people all over the world, China, South Korea, Japan, Canada, everywhere. So it's cool to get his perspective too with the client, who's out east, whereas he's in New York.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a pretty full episode today. We're going to cover the 30K IOST winners. Those payouts were given out because it is now Wednesday. We have Beam Meetup recap. We had the Beam and IOST meetup in Boston that was recapped by BBC. They kind of give us the quick summary on how it went, as well as the dApp tier ranking list that dropped yesterday. OnBlock going live with their platform, NeoWorld /IOST Land, as well as a couple points to outro the video. So are you ready for this?
I'm ready, man. I'm excited. This OnBlock is looking nice so far.
Pretty solid. Pretty solid. It's definitely a good start. So we'll start the episode here talking about the 30K winners. We had the one from Telegram, one from Twitter. They were actually paid out yesterday. So that is a good thing. They passed KYC. They first of all, they said they would be okay with being KYC.
Yes,
that's always an important part in crypto.
Very important. Yeah, for sure. Appreciate everybody that participated there. For when we do this again, one important point not to glaze over was that if you go back to the previous podcast we had, I think it was, or maybe the weekly update, we broke down the chances that you had between Twitter and Telegram, right? And there was something like 670 different entrants essentially into the Twitter side of it, right? So 15,000 IOST worth. but then there was only, what, like 64, 60, something like that in the Telegram. So do the math. Your chances next time, unless Telegram blows up, are going to be much stronger in Telegram. So
true.
Twitter's a hot spot for crypto, but don't forget about Telegram either.
Yeah, and we'll be running these competitions with other parts of our social media as well. So I could foresee something like a YouTube channel or YouTube episode and leaving comments there. So there'll be some definite ways to win more IOST going forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So we had that Beam and IOST meetup. Obviously, Block Venture Coalition was up there co-hosting the event, co-hosting with...
They were co-hosting with, I believe, the Boston College Crypto Club.
Got it.
It wasn't co-hosted with Fidelity, but it was at one of their spots.
Yep.
Had some really strong turnout. Had some professors coming from a lot of the blockchain groups, which was really cool.
Yep.
2 folks from the Block Venture side. So all in all, it was good. Good first event. Boston's got a nice little crypto scene, it seems. So as the university kind of year closes up here, understanding that Block Ventures focus is really on universities across the country. We'll likely start to see some more Block Venture, kind of situated events in the fall as universities kick up again. So students are out for the summer.
Right.
That's when we'll start to see some of those next meetups. And then obviously, like we said last week, we'll be in New York City for Blockchain Week. So
that's going to be big. That's May 13th through the 17th, correct?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So we'll make sure to get some social media out there at those events that we're going to. Obviously, Crypto Mondays by Crypto Oracle is one. Come through. We can chat IOST.
Absolutely.
Talk shop, all that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah. If you guys are there, reach out to us. If you want to reach out to Mike, it's mike@sutlerventures.com, correct?
Yep.
And if you want to reach out to me because you don't like Mike, it is zach.kzada@sutlerventures.com. Yep. So the next thing we'll get to really quick. Actually, they had a 30-minute networking session, too, at all these events. So that's good if you want to network with individuals inside of crypto. So the next thing we'll touch on, other than the fact that we will be doing we'll go live from New York City too, by the way, but we'll be hosting someone on our podcast. We haven't really locked it down yet. We don't want to kind of pin him to actually coming out, but we're trying to make sure that happens while we're up in NYC, that we're getting a influencer on our podcast while we're up there. Yeah, sure. Exactly. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about OnBlock. I know it says the dApp tier ranking list here, but we're going to talk about OnBlock first. So I signed up for OnBlock. I don't know if you've officially registered yet.
I haven't yet, but I've seen it through yours. It seems kind of like the first step of Oasis in this integration that we're getting.
Yeah, it was pretty seamless in registering. So for those of you that haven't looked into OnBlock, that was kind of... So now we've pretty much known that Oasis is the team behind what's going on with OnBlock. So Oasis is the team. OnBlock is the actual tool.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think there was a plan for rebranding at some point. Jimmy tweeted that, but then he deleted the tweet. So maybe some reconsideration there. But for now, as we see it, Oasis is the integration. Like you said, it looks like we're going to have kind of multiple, integrations under Oasis as well that are going to kind of pull everything together.
So yeah, Oasis is kind of the umbrella where the arms in one arm could be seen as this OnBlock platform.
Right. Yeah.
So OnBlock, if you guys haven't been to it, it's basically going to allow non-crypto users, but also crypto users to seamlessly integrate, or seamlessly use dApps by integrating into all of the dApps essentially in the IOST ecosystem. I actually signed up for OnBlock. It was a phone number registration, so basically you had to enter your phone number. They sent a code to your cell phone, as well as obviously having to set up a password. But after that, I was able to log in. It looks like Endless Dice is the only dApp that's being integrated now. But if you look into the deposit section, you can actually see that there is an Ethereum, an EOS, and a Tron logo. So it looks like OnBlock is actually going to be integrating all of these, networks in the future.
Yeah, it's smart, right? I mean, there are communities within each one, have their pros, have their cons. So it makes sense. I mean, we saw Endless do this with EOS kind of starting out and testing there. They've had some success on that platform too. So yeah, it totally makes sense. Makes sense that Endless would be the first one to integrate as well.
Sure.
Understanding kind of the volume there. But, one important point that you brought up was that once you sign up, right? Once you basically input your phone number and create a password with your phone number, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Once you do that, you still have to go and basically deposit IOST.
Oh yeah, we talked.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So there's still some friction there. Certainly understanding that this is just kind of the first piece of Oasis, as it seems, and a good step. But we're definitely not there fully yet. If you look at like Burmy, for example, which is always the example we use. Burmy, super simple, right? Phone number, email, whatever it is. Sign up for your account. Boom, you can start watching videos. Boom, collecting Burm tokens.
Yep.
That's what we want at the end of the day. The trick, of course, is that how do you do that on chain, and how do you do that across multiple dApps?
Yeah. That's a tough question that I don't think we can break out on air.
Definitely not.
But I think the issue here with it's not with OnBlock, it's actually with the dApps. Because again, OnBlock, Oasis, this is all for getting the non-cryptocurrency user to start using blockchain applications.
Right.
The issue isn't with OnBlock. This is great, but the issue is actually all the dApps that are live now require an input of IOST to actually play that game, or interact with the dApp.
Right.
What you have with Burmy is you're just interacting with the dApp and you can possibly earn the token. That's not what we see with the dApps currently. So that's what Mike's talking about. So I have OnBlock as this pseudo wallet essentially, easy sign up for the non-cryptocurrency user. But in order to use a dApp, I would still need to buy IOST,
right,
send it to this account. These are all friction layers to the non-cryptocurrency user.
100%. Yeah, it's everybody wants free, and it makes sense why you would. And one of the things we talked about, I don't know if it was on one of the original podcasts or not, but that over time we've kind of moved from having to pay for things, right? Say cable or something like this, right? You have to pay for access. You have to pay in order to play. Pay to play, right? And then that's very quickly moved to free, right? So like on video game consoles, battle royale games have blown up, right? Fortnite is free. A lot of these battle royale games are free, and they incentivize in other ways. The beauty of what crypto could bring is that it takes it one step further, right? So not only is the game free to play, but you can actually earn.
Play to
earn. And that's big. All of the incentive layers are there. Crypto makes it easy, but obviously, making sure Oasis is integrated in the right way is what's going to be key, so those new users can come on board easily.
So I think the perfect marriage with this OnBlock integration would be finding a dApp or a dApp coming into IOST that doesn't need IOST to be interacted with, but that you could earn IOST or earn whatever token is within that dApp, and it goes directly to your OnBlock wallet.
Yep. Yeah,
that would
100%.
be great. Okay, cool. So we'll move on to the next, little point here. This is going to be the dApp tier ranking list. This is now the second version of the dApp tier ranking list. Ooh. And also, real quickly, I'm touching because it obviously just came out, I think, a day ago, was the dApp roundup by the actual IOST team. They have some cool information here. It's all the on-chain data. So number of dApps has risen to 14, I believe, from 12 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
Number of IOST partner nodes, 238. Number of transactions, 36,725,656, and number of accounts has risen to 256,544.
Yeah, that's great. I think the number of accounts has slowed down a little bit here, but the one that jumps out at me is the partner nodes, right? So as IOST was still in testnet, one of the things that I saw that was so exciting that I think now has really come to fruition in a lot of ways is that incentive layer around staking that brings in your content creators, your dApps, right, your wallets or your exchanges, all of these players, and that hasn't really slowed down at all, right? We're seeing more and more partner nodes and survey nodes come to the forefront, and I think as the market continues to recover and move out of this bear market, it's only going to keep increasing.
I like that. I like that thought a lot.
Yeah. So whether you're a content creator out there, if you're just an enthusiast, right, consider operating a partner node or survey node. There's some great things that all of the nodes are working on together. You can work directly with the IOST team, and sometimes it's just as simple as putting out articles, or if you're a developer, right, working on some of these bug bounties or otherwise, and you can really still and in a lot of different ways make an impact on IOST's growth, which is super cool.
And you can be part of that contribution rewards at the end of the quarter. So explain the difference between that partner node and the survey node.
Yeah, and this is an important point we have on here to talk about too, because there's been some changes in the minimums that are required. So the partner node is essentially kind of that not lower tier, but kind of like less complex tier, I guess, for nodes, where as far as I know, the partner nodes are just validating transactions. They're not actually producing blocks, right? So this is the setup with many other protocols. EOS has this. Tron might have this as well. But essentially what it does is it allows you to kind of build out the ecosystem without, too greatly increasing the number of block producers, right?
Gotcha.
So that can slow down latency or block production times or whatnot. So those partner nodes, you don't really have a minimum with IOST as far as I know, but the survey nodes now have increased from 2.1 million IOST required to 8 million IOST required.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the reason behind that?
Well, so again, looking kind of at the scalability of IOST and really the maturity of IOST, I think a decision that they made was that there are a couple key points that are required for this staking, this block production setup, right? This kind of like hybrid delegated proof of stake model to work. One of the most important ones is that based on the IOST token price and where the team or the community thinks that token price will sit for some time, the block producers, right, those survey nodes have to be profitable, because otherwise the incentive layer is, the incentive model there doesn't work. If it costs you $6,000 or $8,000 a year to run your servers, but you're only making $4,000, nobody's going to do it.
Yep.
Right.
It's the ugly truth, essentially.
Exactly. So when you move from 2.1 million IOST required to 8 million, what you do is you make it a little bit harder, for sure, for people to come on and bring their, kind of become a survey node. But in doing that, you decrease the total number of survey nodes. So it's kind of like a ceiling, or it's a way to kind of slow growth of the survey nodes to ensure that rewards aren't split up so much, especially among those lower lower voted block producers, that then you end up with this super kind of centralized group of block producers.
It's almost like where you have a set piece of food that everyone's trying to eat from.
Exactly.
And if you cut that into, a billion slices, no one's actually going to get fed.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
So it's a balance. I think IOST is doing a good job of not just kind of throwing this out in the wild and hoping it works, but also monitoring it and maintaining this incentive model that certainly has some aspects of centralization, because the team is making these changes, but at the end of the day, the goal is for it to be and live on its own out in the wild. And I think that's what it's going to take. You've got to have that maintenance and that monitoring of sorts happening.
Cool. All right, so we'll move on to the next segment. This is a segment I've been looking forward to for a little while now. So basically, we have those dApp tier rankings. I'll have the actual article linked in the description of this video. But if you haven't checked it out, basically bi-weekly and sometimes weekly, I've been putting out these, or going forward, maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly, I've been putting out these dApp tier rankings where I've had the infographic as well as a description of all the dApps, or most of the dApps within the IOST ecosystem, ranked. So these are my personal rankings. Again, they're not investment advice. It's not financial advice. This is just, hey, this is what I think of these dApps and the usability behind it, the token economies behind it, blah, blah, blah. So I basically put that together. Mike has the list in front of him. He's going to play a little game. What game are we playing?
So what I want to do is I want to give you the name of the dApp.
Okay.
And then in only one word, you have to describe it as quick as you can. So we'll do like a fire round here, a lightning round.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just to put this out there, I didn't do any type of prep for this.
This is all we're freestyling.
Yeah, we're freestyling. So if it takes me a second, or I add another word and it's not just one word, maybe we can do it. So all right, hit me.
Alrighty. So we're gonna start from top to bottom here.
Oh, we're gonna go top to bottom. Okay.
Endless dice.
Endless dice. Experienced.
That's good. I like that. Token Pocket.
You can add your notes to my
notes. Okay,
my talk
nice.
to
I like
Token Pocket, usable.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I like that.
Great.
You could have like, I was when we were talking about this before the podcast, I was trying to think of some way to like bring in Pocket. Like I got sunshine in my pocket. Or something.
You want to be all cute with it. I'm just trying to be efficient with it. Here we go.
IOST Play.
Smooth.
iWallet.
God.
We'll go with that.
No. Respectable.
Respectable. Oh, wow. I like it. IOST Joy.
Improvement needed. That's kind of two.
I would say Slithery.
Okay, so you're just going all day with this. All right, here we go.
IOST Voter.
IOST Voter. Average.
Mango Dice.
Double average.
Game ADC.
Standard. Triple average.
Triple average. Cell Evolution.
Boring.
IOST ROI.
Scam.
That was pretty good. You sped up as we went there.
I felt I felt myself getting a little bit better as the time went on.
I got one more for you that is a favorite. Crypto Derby.
Crypto Derby. Nay.
I like it. See that? See the play on words there? Nay. I like it.
I actually stole that from you.
Yeah, it's okay.
Just for everyone's, awareness, I stole that from him.
I was gonna give you credit.
So that top list right now, the A list, is really the only ones that come through as being, one, usable and also entertaining. So anything below kind of that B category is going to be pretty average or has some type of flaw. Anything above it, that C tier. So IOST Joy again kind of has issues with the usability around it. You really need
instructions.
You really need instructions. It's got translation issues as well. So and then the others are pretty average. And then you have boring, scam, blah blah blah.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and the beauty of the setup is that now as we're moving, coming up on 2 months past mainnet, I think.
Yeah.
Right. We've got dApps at I think 14 now, so it seems like as this increases, we're gonna have dozens on this tier list.
Oh, absolutely.
At some point.
And they'll move around. Like I think I was a little bit too harsh on IOST Joy. I gave it like the D rating right off the bat because I had some latency issues and I lost
IOST.
I lost the IOST. But we went back. We actually I don't know if I was connected to an Ethernet cable or what, but I was able to play IOST Joy, so there was no issues with the actual usability of it. It was just kind of the explanations and the interface behind it. So IOST Joy was a big riser. They moved from D to C. IOST Play, I think, is gaining on Endless Dice. They actually have more volume now than Endless Dice. We'll see if it can sustain that, because it's happened a couple times where it's risen above Endless Dice for a little while, then kind of dipped.
Gotcha.
But that it might be more organic growth. We'll see what happens because they only have 100 users, but have more volume than Endless Dice. So it's interesting to see, that dichotomy. But volume is always the most important thing. With these gambling dApps, it's the most important. It's the gold, essentially, that fuels these gambling dApps right now, because volume is going to increase your profits if you're staking.
Yeah, 100%. And as we talked about on the podcast last week, I think it was, one of the key takeaways from the discussion that we had with IOST Play was that they are really trying to set up the mining or staking, whatever you want to call it, set up with their dApp in a way that mirrors their development, right? So instead of giving everything away at first, they want to slowly build, right? They want to onboard those organic users, like you said. So if they can do that, and they can really challenge Endless Dice, certainly we'll have two really strong dApps there outside of the Berm squad. But I think it'll push both teams to really develop and advance their products.
One thing I really liked about IOST Play, because obviously we've been involved with dApps on EOS, on Tron, on Ethereum. They have a team based in the United States. What you see a lot of times is these dApps actually, you don't know exactly who they are, and two, they're overseas somewhere. So it's tough as an American user, as a United States user, to kind of interact with these people, as well as keep up to date with exactly what the team's doing. So
it's a great point. I mean, it's something that we touch on with Josh from Quetzal, and that I think that China and Asia in a lot of ways are dominating crypto right now. So it's kind of cool to see, like you said, see that coming from the West as well.
Cool. So we'll finish up pretty much with the last topic here. NeoWorld announced a partnership with IOST. This is going to be the team behind IOST Land. Now I'm going to take a quick tidbit of information here from the article where the partnership was announced. It says, this is from Jimmy. It says, we don't want a lot of zombie dApps and I want you to not think of zombie dApps as like a zombie dApp where they actually, yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's relating these gambling dApps to zombie dApps, and what it means is all these average gambling dApps. So we don't want a lot of zombie dApps with only minors and short-term users. We diligently select development teams in order to secure success by quality and to provide optimal infrastructure for excellent dApps. What do you think about that?
Jimmy's smart, right? Jimmy has been in the game a long time. Jimmy has, sold previous companies. I think he has a very good understanding of where value is accrued in the long term. And he's right, like a lot of these protocols, it is kind of that short term, money grab. There's not a ton of value acquisition happening with users because it is that short term, hey, I'm going to just buy a shitload of these dice tokens or these gambling tokens or whatever it is because I know for at least a few months I'll get my rewards, and then boom, dump.
I imagine this Game of Thrones where you're like sitting in the castle and there's just a whole bunch of zombie dApps actually just coming at you with all their like logos on their face, and you're like, no, I don't want this.
Spoiler alert if you haven't. Sorry, Deem.
Yeah, sorry about that, Dima. We didn't actually drop anything crazy. All right, we're coming up to the end of the first half of the episode here. So IOST Land is essentially going to be kind of like a Decentraland. It's going to be that virtual reality 3D experience where you have this in-game world where you can buy land, you can build on top of it. Yep. What do you think about it?
Listen, I remember when Decentraland came out, there was so much hype around it. We were spending hundreds of dollars trying to get into that ICO as far as gas fees go. So the concept in general, I love. And then some of the key points here, right, especially as as Jimmy kind of breaks out with real dApps versus zombie dApps, is that during a closed beta testing period, essentially the peak of daily active users reached 23,000.
Wow.
And past that, even more important, there was a 30-day retention rate, meaning those users were retained, right? They stayed, they continued to play, of 73%. And then if you break it down even further, there was a 1-day retention rate of 86%. So again, looking at this from a value standpoint, looking at this as if it's a regular smartphone application, these are all things that you want to see. You don't want to see, as profitable as they can be for some people, you don't want to see those short-term incentives kind of come and go or pump and dump.
Awesome. Yeah, they're scheduled to launch actually in the, I believe, beginning of this month, actually May.
Oh, okay.
So it should be within the next 2 weeks. We'll see exactly how it's launched because they're in that alpha stage right now. We'll see the quality of the dApp as it launches, but it'll be interesting to see this platform as it goes live.
Yeah, 100%. We might be buying some land. We'll have to see.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Can we live next to each other?
Maybe not.
You'll be living in another side of town?
Yeah, it'd be cool. We could do. I'll be living across the railroad.
Okay,
track.
Sounds good. I'll come over there and
we'll do the podcast in virtual reality.
Could be a thing. I like that idea. So tell us what you think about this IOST Land. If you plan on using it, I think this is going to be a really cool first game that we can really get involved in as a team.
Definitely, yeah. And that'll do it for the podcast. We're going to go right into this interview here with Josh from Quetzal Consulting. Again, really interesting perspectives as far as compliance goes. It's nice to get some other kind of points, some other perspectives on what can be an echo chamber sometimes. So you guys enjoy that, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Alrighty, so today we have a very special guest. We are talking to Josh Garcia of Quetzal Consulting. Josh, how are you today?
Good. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about Quetzal Consulting. What do you guys do? How do you work within the crypto space? All that fun stuff.
Sure. Quetzal is celebrating, actually in April, a year of being in operation. Quetzal is a compliance consulting shop. A lot of our clients are crypto clients, not all of them. We also have a law firm that's affiliated with this entity called Blakemore Fallon. And between both entities, we focus on helping mainly crypto companies and other fintech companies, some legal tech companies, navigate the regulatory environment.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, we saw on the website you guys work with Waxman, who we know you work with Bitflyer, you work with a handful of other companies. Were you in consulting, in some other space before you started focusing on crypto? Or how did you kind of get into this?
So my professional career has been primarily as a lawyer. Before I became a lawyer, I studied poetry. I have a master's in fine arts in that. So as a lawyer, I have been representing crypto companies since early 2014. And you asked about, compliance specifically, but lawyers are kind of a grab bag of things. We provide legal services. We manage projects for people. We make sure that companies are diligent about administrative things, and we provide regulatory compliance advice. So the legal services bit of being a lawyer is just kind of a small piece of it. A lot of what lawyers do is project management, it's regulatory compliance, it's business consulting from the legal perspective. So I think because compliance was bound up with my job for many years, I didn't really see them as distinct. We decided to have this dual entity split where one focuses more on regulatory compliance and the other on legal services, because we thought we could offer purely non-legal compliance services such as getting money transmitter licenses or doing other policies and procedures drafting that you wouldn't have to do at a law firm. You don't need to use a lawyer to do that stuff. So we could separate the tasks a bit and have different business lines and growth strategies for each of the entities.
Gotcha. Very cool. So what are some of the biggest differences you've seen between what you might call crypto consulting and some of the traditional consulting?
Yeah, I think in crypto you have consultants who advise from their particular silo. So our particular silo is the law. So we advise based on compliance with what we know about complying with the law. You have other folks who focus on auditing technology. So their silo is code, and they focus on providing code audits and not compliance rather. They advise on improving the tech from a pretty technical perspective, not at all considering, in many instances, the consequences that those would have from a legal perspective or compliance perspective. And then you have folks who are purely business, so they advise you on the economics of what you're doing and whether or not your company is going to be profitable. And again, different from the code advice rather than the code consulting and the compliance consulting. So people are pretty siloed. Some folks try to pull together a range of these different specializations and create these miniature investment banks. And so to an extent that you're able to do that, and you get really good people in each of these silos, and you can have a pretty comprehensive consulting shop for crypto. But for the most part, people are independent, right? People are running their shops independently of each other. And when we do work together with other compliance shops, it actually works pretty well. So sometimes you'll have a partnership with a shop that focuses on tech, and I've worked as a lawyer on joining calls on how to develop products, and you have the tech folks putting their piece in and the lawyers putting their piece in, and it can work out pretty well. And you kind of need that when you're developing the next generation of financial instruments. You need parties involved.
So I kind of have a general question here. As far as your background as a lawyer, how is the U.S. doing regulation-wise? What's your opinion there? What's your opinion on what's going on in New York City and kind of around the country?
I think the U.S. has been leading the charge in many ways. For better or worse, the enforcement actions from the SEC have guided how the industry is going to do its day-to-day operations. there are key business decisions made as a result of the SEC's enforcement actions, even when they don't touch the company that's making the decision. So the U.S. has such jurisdictional reach that it scares a lot of companies, even if they're abroad, from into acting a certain way. So the fear of enforcement action is what's driving a lot of entities to comply or to call us or to call other law firms to try to figure out how to manage the U.S. risk. And I think that because of the broad jurisdictional reach of the U.S., even if you touch one investor in the U.S., you're subject to the securities laws. Even if you have one resident of California or New York, you're subject to money transmitter or laws or the bit license. The result is just by virtue of enforcement action that you've seen, you have the U.S. law dictating, or not dictating, but just causing companies that are completely outside of the U.S. To structure their compliance systems with the U.S. in mind.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a consequence of that. The devil's advocate of that would be that if there's a scenario where those companies outside of the U.S. don't want to deal with that compliance or don't want to deal with that regulation, they might just cut off the U.S. entirely, right? Block IPs, do all that fun stuff. Run the necessary KYC, AML that they need to ensure that the U.S. investors or U.S. users aren't able to participate. So, with that in mind, do you think there's any potential that if the U.S. leads the charge on regulation and other countries don't necessarily follow, that the U.S. could fall behind in some way?
So you said it was a devil's advocate. I disagree. I think it's actually what I was referring to. It's a natural result of the sort of enforcement tack. It's in fact, it's ironic that you have, in order to make sure you don't have any liability in the U.S., you have to engage protocols that a U.S. regulator would be happy to see, like KYC and doing OFAC checks, right? Like you're essentially implementing protocols that a U.S. regulator might want you to put in place so that you don't have to deal with the U.S. regulator. It's right. It's a weird result. As to the U.S. falling behind, no, a lot of projects that are serious will eventually make their way over here. I think some projects are doing what you suggested. I know for a fact some of them are just completely shutting out the U.S. and making sure that they don't touch any people who might.
BitMEX is probably the most prominent example.
They're a prime example of that, and I think not saying anything about BitMEX in particular, but in general, if you have a serious project, you have the U.S. somewhere in your business plan, and so it might not be in year 1 or 2 of your business plan, but maybe it's in year 5. I think a lot of these projects, they want to be global projects. So I don't think the U.S., just because of the regulations, would fall behind in any way. I think the U.S. eventually would get whatever tech the rest of the world will be getting. It's just more exciting in other jurisdictions where you have parts of Latin America or parts of Africa that will be leapfrogging into this new tech, and so they are, the U.S. isn't kind of behind, but from the perspective of folks who are in countries where there's not broadband tech and you're jumping into 5G or 4G even, and you get access to these decentralized protocols that let you do a range of things. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there are so many users available there and kind of through that model. I mean, it's the typical saying is like banking the unbanked. That's what you hear a lot, especially in parts of Africa, right? So I get that point 100%. I mean, Binance is another example. CZ has basically come out and said that their focus is really not on the U.S. right now. They're going to kind of wait for others to figure it out, or wait for that regulation to really be simplified and understood, which, to your point, I think to some degree presents a risk for Binance, because there are so many users and there is, so much money and so much resources within the US, or even just within major cities within the US, that if Binance doesn't do it, or BitMEX doesn't do it, or insert whatever company doesn't do it, they don't go through those regulatory hurdles and that compliance, somebody else who's willing to do that is gonna do it and gonna steal their user base, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that there's a lot of value out of kind of going the regulatory route. I mean, it's a moat around your company, which is a common saying that people use. The fact that you have 50 state money transmitter licenses, and you went through the hassle of getting them, back in like 2013, 2014. If you're one of those companies, it can go a long way, because you don't have to build out your compliance regime in 2018 when you have a lot of new exciting projects coming out, right? You're already set up to go. You steal market share.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. Well, broadly, kind of pulling back to 30,000 feet here. Obviously, 2017 was crazy, right? A lot of mania, a lot of hype. 2018, much more of a brutal year, especially the last 9-10 months. So far in 2019, and kind of looking into the future of this year a little bit, what has piqued your interest, and what do you think will be a really key storyline for 2019?
This is a nerdy answer that piqued my interest, are the strange legal questions that come up. So I teach a class at Michigan Law School on blockchain and the law. I co-teach with one of the other principals at Quetzal. And, the students will ask all sorts of strange questions, and we'll bring up all sorts of weird scenarios. But the funny thing is, they don't end up being all that strange or all that weird, because somewhere someone is building something that's going to press on these pressure points in the law. And so some of the interesting key legal things, I think, that will come up over the next couple of years, or maybe just end of 2019 and in 2020, are questions around custodianship. So the securities laws, there's this concept of a qualified custodian, but then there's also the concept of just a custodian of crypto, and people are in the market using those two words. They're equivocating on the use of those two words. They're sort of saying, I am a custodian, but being a qualified custodian is very different. And so the question of what use a qualified custodian is in the world of crypto is going to be an interesting one, and how that shakes out. Now, the other interesting question has to do with unclaimed property laws. You have, in many of the states, if you leave your gift card money, let's say you get a $20 gift card and you spend $18 of it, and the remaining $2 is just sitting there. Okay. In some states, they require you to give the money to that state after a number of years if it just goes completely untouched. Other states require you to reach out to the person and make efforts to get them their gift card money in some way or another. And these questions of law they have to deal with an area of law called escheatment, E-S-C-H-E-A-T-ment.
Okay.
And there's no good way to escheat, meaning to return to the state, or to give to the state for the custody of a customer or a resident of the state. There's no good way to escheat crypto right now. Like, how do you go to the state of whatever, Kansas, and say, I have a customer who has just left a Bitcoin sitting on this platform for the past 3 years, and I can't find them. So then how do you give that to the state, to custody for the customer, until they go online, they go to, do I have assets lying around anywhere.com, and this pop-up shows that they're owed an outstanding paycheck from this gig that they did in Kentucky from 6 years ago, and they have a Bitcoin that was sent over from this exchange. There's no good way to custody, for a state to custody crypto. There's no, as far as I know, service provider that's focusing on this question. But these laws come into effect after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and exchanges are gonna have to deal with this question starting in 2020. Maybe some of them this year, actually.
That's wild. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that law. I wasn't aware of that with the gift cards. So you think that moving forward 2019, 2020, this will be something that exchanges then they have to work with, essentially? I mean, the biggest thing that comes to mind is kind of the hold setup, right? The hodl setup that exists with crypto. So if I'm somebody who buys Bitcoin in 2018 and just leaves it there on Coinbase or whatnot until 2021, that might not be there if I haven't logged in or am not active, or what?
Yeah, the easiest scenario, or the cleanest one, is where you just never interact with not speaking to Coinbase specifically, but never interact with whatever exchange you put your funds on, and you just leave it there, and the exchange reaches out. You never even open the emails that they send you. You just have no interaction. Like, that's the easiest scenario where this achievement might come into play. Depending on the law of the particular state, if you open the email, if you go to your account website, if you just check your balance every once in a while, that might be enough to refresh the statute of limitations, or the time, not statute of limitations, but the time period within which the state or the exchange would have to start the clock running again. So there might be things the exchange could do to reset the clock so long as you're active. But if you're completely inactive, then yeah, these will be issues.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll have to look into that. I haven't ever heard anything about that, but it's certainly a key topic. So looking at some of the other clients that you guys work with, one of them is Bitflyer, right? So Bitflyer is an Asian company. We're obviously the IOST podcast, right? IOST is primarily an Asian-based project, right? That's where all the founders come from. What are some of the cultural differences within crypto that you've seen between your Asian clients and your say more Western clients?
Yeah, I don't think it's crypto specific. There are differences, mainly, especially in Japan. So Bitflyer and many other companies in Asia, they have U.S. entities, but those U.S. entities will often have to refer their decision-making up to the counterpart in India or in Japan or what have you. And business culture in those countries is different. In Japan, it's very, I believe it's very much consensus-driven in Japan, which just makes working with that kind of company it's hard to explain how it's different. From our perspective as lawyers. The work is the same, right? The work, the analysis is the same. So it's really just kind of differences on the edges that don't matter to our day-to-day, but they matter more for the company. So as far as cultural differences, it's nice to go to Japan and be hosted by a client, because you go to a country in Asia and a client is hosting you. It's like a very welcoming, warm experience. In the U.S., it's similar. Right? If I were to go to California and see a client, it's similar because it's still warm and welcoming, but it's less I don't want to say ceremonial, but it's less
like formal, or
it's less formal. It's a lot less formal.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, it's something that we've certainly noticed, and one of the biggest things has been the that I think I've seen has been the work ethic, right? I mean, this is something that when we had, I think it was Jimmy or Ray, two of the co-founders of IOST, on the podcast, they've done crazy things, right? Sold companies while they were still in college and built all of this. And one of the questions we asked them was, how have you done so much in such a short amount of time? And their answer was just simply that when you look at the East versus West, the East just tends to work a lot harder when it comes to this stuff. So that's something that we've seen anyway. I would say that right now, at least from my perspective, China and Asia in a lot of ways dominate crypto. I think especially behind the scenes, IEOs, initial exchange offerings, are all context understood with them, something that seems to be dominated by that region too. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of adapts and changes. Speaking of IOST, IOST has this really unique kind of hybrid staking setup with their consensus mechanism being called proof of believability, which is, again, like a hybrid proof of stake, hybrid delegated proof of stake. And we've seen with Tezos and a handful of other staking projects that staking is really kind of coming to the forefront here in 2019. Do you see any legal or compliance implications that might find its way to staking in the future?
So, of course, right? Staking, every new tech will have to struggle with this old law that's been sitting on the books for many years. The way I approach whether or not a new implementation of something blockchain related will touch on the law, I ask, like, what's the activity? Like, who are the players? Who are the people? And what are they doing? So if you have any entity in the staking ecosystem that is doing something that looks like a securities offering, it's going to trigger securities laws. If you have any entity that looks like they're taking funds and then transmitting it to somewhere else on someone else's behalf, then they're going to trigger money transmitter laws, right? So the laws find you easily if you're engaging in regulated activity, no matter the form that regulated activity takes. And so whether or not an issue exists with a new implementation of tech, for me, comes down to this very elemental analysis of who's doing what. It's that simple.
Gotcha.
So this idea of kind of the institutionalization of crypto has obviously creeped up over the past couple of years. What is your take on that idea, and where do you see it going in 2019 and 2020?
Yeah, it's funny. That can mean, I think, two different things. The institutionalization of crypto could mean centralized blockchains, right? Or centralized databases that use blockchain tech but no coin to keep track of a range of things. Sometimes transactions, sometimes just customer data. Right. So this whole, since I think R3 was the main one to start pushing for this coalition of enterprise blockchain interested institutions. But it could also mean crypto replicating existing financial institution structures, right? Crypto lending, crypto accepting of deposits that will pay an interest yield, crypto offering of securities. And I know you asked for my thoughts on this. I have so many thoughts on each of those things, on each of those threads. And if the question is, is there going to be good or bad that's going to come out of this, I think that line of questioning is, just because I'm a lawyer, it's dangerous to class tech as anything other than neutral, right? I'm very much an advocate of policies that are tech neutral, that are principles based as opposed to prescriptive, because the notion of something as good or bad would suggest you should either allow it to flourish or cut down its growth. And sometimes that prophylactic cutting of growth could be damaging in the long run. And so I'm hesitant to label things as good or bad. Certainly bad things will come of each of these implementations, because on the enterprise level, you don't know if they will be implemented properly within the entity, and you don't have outsiders who are able to audit that code. And then from the replicating financial institutions level, you may not have implementations that are regulated properly. So for instance, if you try to replicate a savings account structure, but you don't attach to it all of the things that you associate with a savings account, for instance, federal deposit insurance, the consumer disclosures, then you might be running up against the problems that you had before the implementation of the FDIC and before the implementation of consumer protection laws, but just in this new context of crypto. So certainly there will be bad actors who will take advantage of these threads, right? Either an enterprise or there will be mistakes that will be made. But there will also, I think, as a counterpart to that, certainly be good. There will be innovative technology. There will be companies that are running more efficiently on their back-end system as a result of the implementation of enterprise blockchains in ways that are mainly invisible to consumers, but may reduce the ultimate cost of consumer goods. And as far as the replication of financial institutions, you may have more people or less people who are unbanked as a result.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting. I mean, it's a thread or kind of a narrative that evolves every year. This institutionalization or kind of your decentralization versus centralization topic within crypto, as many businesses don't skirt regulation while many others like your BitMEX do. So very interesting. Really appreciate the time and the thoughts there. It's one that we don't always get on this podcast, so it's good to have that insight. Any other thoughts for our listeners? And if they want to follow you or follow Quetzal Consulting, what's the best way for them to do so?
Right. We have a Twitter. If you search Quetzal Consulting, it should come up. We have LinkedIn, obviously, as companies often do. So either of those two ways. Usually we tweet a lot about what we're up to. We just finished teaching the class, so we have a tweet out about that and a LinkedIn post about that. Nice. But every so often we'll write stuff as well. So I think we have if your listeners are interested, I have a piece up on our Medium site, Quetzal Medium site, about staking as a service.
Very nice. Yeah, that'll definitely be of interest, and that's Quetzal, Ketsal. So everybody go check that out. Check that Medium post out. Give him a follow on Twitter. And Josh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Of course. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Josh.